It's crazy. Like from when we started, we just recently talked about that, how we recorded our very first video it was like in our no, it's not a venue, like our old place where we used to play Magic with a couple of more players. It was called Limo Lounge, and limo is soda in German, and it was like a cozy place to hang out, and I don't know, it was crazy. Samuel, do you remember like when we built our base in order to hold the camera?
It was an interesting setup because the guy who was sort of responsible for, or who ran the limo lounge, he was on a really tight budget, so he got together with an architect friend of his, and they basically built all the furniture themselves, which was good because it was cheap, not so good because it wasn't that sturdy. So
that's true.
Yeah, we had some issues with that, and then setting all that up on these table on like a combination of tables and what's it called, crates.
Yeah.
For like, I don't know if you have we call it fund. It basically just there's a government program that guarantees that all the bottles that you buy and cans and stuff can be returned for a fee. So you pay a fee when you get something to drink, and then you get a fee back when you return it.
It's like a deposit and a refund.
Yeah. And
exactly,
you get that in every store, and every store has to take everything back, and you can get crates for lots of that stuff, and they are used in like when people are on a budget, people use those to construct tables and structures and stuff like that.
Yes,
usually something students do,
right.
and in our case, we had like 6 crates that held up the plank of wood that held up the webcam we used to record the first couple of videos.
Yeah, it was quite hilarious if you think back, because back in the day, like, we haven't had any professional setup at all. Like, just come on, let's make some videos. Like, the intention was out there. I know we started some new commanders, and I thought like, okay, I think it was Thrasios Tymna back then. I wanted to have some content in order to understand how the combos run or function. And then I looked at YouTube. There was absolutely no content, and I thought, guys, how is this possible? Like, YouTube is out there, you can make stuff. Okay, let's do it on our own. That's how it started. But yeah, today's guest is Steven, or you will know him as villaraza from MTG Top 8, or also Duel Commander PH. You are with the format since 4 years already, I think. Is that correct?
Actually, longer, if I recall. I mean, I started Duel Commander back in 2012. I've been in and out of the format, especially when I had my training in Singapore, because in Singapore, DC was non-existent. So back when I stayed in Singapore for like 2 years, I didn't have any exposure to Duel Commanders. When I returned back to the Philippines, when I became, again, active in Duel Commander.
Okay, cool. So over in Singapore, when you went to Singapore, you already played Magic overall?
Yes.
Okay, so you started right away with Singleton, or was it some other format?
What do you mean? I started with in Singapore?
No, like, I mean, did you play Singleton, like Duel Commander? Here Highlander was very popular, or you started with Modern, Standard, any other format?
Right. Okay. So when I started playing Magic, I was into Standard. Then when I entered med school, that's when I started playing multiplayer Commander, because I had a lot of cards. I had a couple of friends that played Magic, and at that time Commander was becoming very, very popular. Then after playing a couple of games of multiplayer Commander, I looked for something that was competitive. So that's when I learned about Duel Commander, and back then it was really big thing here in the Philippines. So that's when I started Duel Commander around 2012. Then from there, it was Duel Commander all the way. When I went to Singapore, there was no Duel Commander, so I had to resort to playing Legacy. Then when I returned back, I went back to playing full-time Duel Commander.
That sounds like a nice journey there. Yeah, Legacy is a great format. Or I mean, I'm still interested in, but it's a bit hard to play here in Germany. There are barely any communities, or maybe it's also due to our area. But yeah, so you are a regional coordinator for the Philippines for 3 years now, right?
For 3 years, correct.
Yes.
Correct.
So how did that came along?
Okay, so when I went back from Singapore to when I came back here to the Philippines, we had a regional coordinator. He was Sherwin, no? Sherwin back there, but that was during the pandemic. So the amount of games here in the Philippines were very, very limited because of the lockdowns. And it was then that I decided that maybe I wanted to be a regional coordinator because I really wanted to boost the amount of games of Duel Commander in the Philippines, as well as its popularity, because I really missed the the popularity of DC back again when I started playing, wherein every weekend there would be around 100, 120 players playing DC in one LGS. But when the pandemic hit, it really sank. It really went down to around 8 players, if ever they had time. No? But I really want to change that, and that's the reason I think why I wanted to when I wanted to become an RC, so that I could entice more players to try the format and make the community grow here.
It's awesome to hear that you had 120-ish players already back then, but those events were never submitted to top 8, right?
Yeah, back then it wasn't really. I think back then DC wasn't being submitted. The results for DC were submitted to MTG Top 8. So I think at that time it was still a 30 life HP format, and they still had commander damage. So that's how old DC was for me.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's quite some time ago. I think it was 6 years ago already, 2018, when they made the change to 20 HP, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
So you're already into Duel Commander for quite some time. It's impressive. I've never knew that. For us as Germans, it was like, as I said, we were into Highlander. That's a different format. You've probably heard of Canadian Highlander, right? But
Yeah.
European Highlander is basically Commander without a commander. Singleton has a slightly different rule setting. You can play hybrid spells and stuff like this. But here for Germans, it was like, okay, there's Commander, the multiplayer game, and there's also Duel Commander, which was a new thing back then. Okay, we play competitive when we want, but we have this command zone and can do fancy stuff with it. And we always thought, like, okay, since it was a French thing back in the day, no one else is, aside from some European people, might get into the format. And back then we were even more impressed when we saw suddenly Chinese results from the Philippines, Brazil, and much more. You know, it was quite impressive. Do you know about like how it originally started? How people really got in contact with French or Duel Commander in the first place?
I think it was back then Commander was very, very popular, so I guess it was natural that players tried to look for a format of Commander that was simulating the competitive environment of Standard and Modern back then. So I think the closest thing was Dual Commander.
Yeah, I see. Okay, cool.
Some is very interesting to me. We asked when we did our interview about the Big American a couple of weeks ago. How is the local metagame shaped for you? So the answer that we heard from America was that they refresh MTG Top 8 and look at the deck lists and kind of get their inspiration from there, and that affects their metagame a lot. And it's kind of very reflected. Is that the case for you as well, where you have these kind of sort of rough numbers of 14% Rafine, 8% red deck wins, something like that?
I think it's quite different here in the Philippines, because one of the biggest factors that I would say limit or maybe influence the number of players that are going into DC would be access to the expensive cards, specifically the reserve list cards. So what happens is that most players here in the Philippines would try the format, but they would prefer to create or use decks or commanders that do not rely too heavily on reserve list cards. That's why here in the Philippines we have a lot of we have a lot of Feldons or Mono Reds. We have a lot of Yoshimarus, Mono Whites. We have players that are very proficient in playing Titania and a couple of two-color decks. So when you look at the MTG top 8 results, if you see a lot of decks like Clothes, it's likely to be in the Philippines. So we have a lot of players who are very, very proficient in playing two-color decks that don't really rely heavily on dual lands. But again, when we some of the players that have access to those old cards, then they tend to gravitate towards those decks that can play the different dual lands and other reserve list cards. So I think the that's a general environment here in the Philippines when it comes to dual commander. So it's heavily influenced by the accessibility.
Okay. In terms of accessibility, where do you get your cards from? Do you rather order them from Japan? You get them from the US? Is there like like here in Europe, we have Card Market, for example. In the US, there's TCG players and stuff like this, like big platforms to trade cards. Is there something similar in the Philippines?
Not a lot. When it comes to the cards from standard and modern sets, quite easy to get. But for those cards that are in the reserve list, um, the pool of players that have those cards at hand at any given moment is very very limited, and most of them are collectors, so they don't really sell or dispose of their cards to the general card pool of the market here. So some players would usually buy online, or they try to join the tournaments in order to win or get the chance to win the dual land themselves or any reserve list cards for that matter.
Interesting, because that's something that, like, we have. Every community has players that are more on a budget, younger players, or people that are studying and don't have a lot of spare cash on hand. But I think in the German tournaments, I think in most of the French tournaments that I've been to and the Czech tournaments that I've been to, very rarely do you have an opponent that cracks a fetch land and doesn't have a dual land in their deck and things like that.
Yeah, correct, true. That's also what I observe in some of the games when I watch them online. So here you would see players that would usually crack a fetch land and take two for a shock land just to have an optimal play. So that does have an impact overall. If especially if you're going against on an aggro deck, then that two life might matter in most games.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's here in Europe or in the US, it's much more easy. I mean, as long as you have these platforms, they also offer you to have a business around this, card trading games, and even if you do not own the cards here, you can go to a vendor and borrow them, sometimes for a fee or even free of charge or something like this, and then you have it for a tournament. And if you don't have the opportunity, then it's obviously a bit more challenging and also defines the metagame. That's quite interesting, to be honest. So there has been the very first Duel Commander tournament in Thailand recently.
Yes.
In which you have participated, right?
Yes.
And tell me, like, how was it over there? Because I've been to Bangkok end of 2022, and we've been to this huge city mall with, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 stages, and there were tons of stores and whatsoever. And I searched for LGS and something to look for Magic and maybe just have a peek into the community over there, what they're playing whatsoever. Couldn't find anything. Now I was quite surprised that there was a big event coming up. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Right. Okay. So actually, this was, I believe, the third Duel Commander event in Thailand. Last year, they had two separate independent Duel Commander events, and it was more of I think during that time they were trying to really experiment on the format and how it will be acceptable in the local Thailand community. But when they saw that there were a lot of players who were keen to try it, I think that's the reason why they included it in the Southeast Asian Championship for Bangkok this year. So what they did there was that they had two qualifier events so that the top 8 of each of the qualifier events will be invited for the main event, wherein the winner will get a dual land, a taiga. And what was quite interesting was that at first we thought that the Thailand community also had the same problems as the Philippines when it comes to card accessibility. So we were anticipating a lot of Feldon players, or at least a lot of aggro players, coming into the event. And this is what happened during the past two events in Thailand. They had a lot of aggro players, and I think the top player for those past events were actually Feldon. But when we came to Bangkok to play in the events, we were surprised to see a lot of Rafine players from the Thailand side of the community, and we even had some Singaporean players also participated in the event. So a lot of them are also playing interesting decks like Rafine, Beamtown Bullies, Slimefoot and Squee, and even Sholdred. And I think they did quite well. If I'm not mistaken, for the event, in the top 16, the meta was very, very diverse.
Yes, sir. I have it just open in top 8. It was indeed. We have 2 times Rafine, Octavia, Yuri, Felden, Beamtown Bullies, Gerson. That's quite nice. So,
Yeah.
You just said that people had huge diversity in terms of decks, and also they were able to play a lot of color combinations. So I assume it was a non-proxy tournament.
Yes, it was a non-proxy tournament.
Is there something you thought about in the Philippines to offer something like this to make the format more accessible to more players?
The conversation about proxy is also a sensitive topic here in the Philippines because we do have a lot of collectors, and they are quite, I would say, against the use of proxies, especially for tournaments with a big price in the payout.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not really against the use of proxies, especially if it will allow players to try the format and to be able to enjoy or play the format. But I think when it comes to big events wherein there's really a huge cash prize at stake, then that becomes an issue of whether or not I think it's about fairness, about on whether or not you allow players to use proxy cards in a more serious tournament environment. So I think that's a sentiment that most players have here in the Philippines. So they don't mind using proxies for casual play, but for tournament play, they're not really keen in using proxies.
This is a discussion that has come up for years, and I think will continue to come up for years. And I think on our side of the pond, to say, it usually comes up where a lot of the most veteran players are fine with anything, and then you get sort of this sub bracket of people that don't really like them, and prefer to only play with real cards. And then there's this kind of space in between where people say, like, I think in our local tournament we are fine with 2 proxies. Is that right, Felix?
That's correct. Yeah, we have 2 proxies, but using the appropriate cards from Wizards, and then people can just write down whatever they are missing, because it's an FNM with 10 to 20ish people. That's okay for that size.
Yeah.
I actually think that's a good way to entice players to try the format. In fact, especially right now, if when cards are very, very hard to get by, especially the reserveless cards, I think proxies might be allowable. at least for those very hard to get cards. And for the rest of the cards, I think that's where the strictness can be implemented.
Yeah, I mean, it's most people will, from my experience, most people will start playing the format seriously with a monocolor deck anyways. Like Felden or Red Deck Wins has the highest chance of being your first deck if you've never touched Magic, or let's say you've never touched Duel Commander before. And also in terms of paying the price for a deck, it's much more attractive than starting with a 3-colored or 4-colored deck. But if there are players that are a bit into it and they want to explore something else and they don't have the card pool, then we just say, okay, go ahead and proxy those dual lands. It's perfectly fine in order for you to have fun and broaden your horizon, so to say.
Yeah. I share the same sentiment.
But I can also understand, like, for the bigger events, I think it's perfectly fine to not allow something like this. If it's not for like very strict rules how proxies should look like. Because on the other hand, you also don't want to emphasize people buying into proxies, like professionally made proxies. Like, you don't really want to support this market, and there are lots of beautiful proxies out there. We already have a couple for your cube, Samuel. That's more than enough, and you don't really want to. Yeah, it's it is how it is. You don't really want to go any deeper into that.
Right. It's sort of like a double-edged sword. Right? It's
Exactly.
like if you accept the good side, then you have to accept the not so good side.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. So I can ask one more question. It's like I'm personally interested in how did you came to the idea to start YouTube too? It was probably the same direction as, like, because you earlier already said that you wanted to give a bigger shout out to Duel Commander overall and make people motivated to play it. So that was probably one vehicle in order to reach that, right?
Right. And actually, the one of my inspirations was your channel. So when
nice.
back then again when the pandemic started, so uh I I really wanted to play Duel Commander, and when I was looking at YouTube, there weren't really a lot of content regarding Duel Commander. Then I saw your channel. I said, "Wow, okay, that's nice. I see at least your channel is showcasing games of Duel Commander." And when the pandemic hit, and I didn't have anything to do, so I said, okay, I think I'll try that. So what I did was I got my camera phone, I tried to make a makeshift camera mount, and just started recording games. And I really wanted to do a commentary for the games, but I really didn't have the time or the skill to edit the videos quite well. So I just went with a simple background, no commentary, just games of videos. So what I wanted to do was to simulate, when there are players playing in the tournament and you're just like there standing at the back and just like watching the games as they happen. I wanted to simulate that type of feeling with my videos. So, and I have to thank you for you and your channel for inspiring me to work on it, and it's been growing ever since.
Thank you very much. That's kind to hear. I think your videos are actually very recognizable by, like, because you decided I will just put some background music, and that's like, it already differs from all the other videos, because some people will, Kellic, for example, he will always talk during the video and explain what's happening. We talking on cam, you have the music, and then there is maybe some live content with live casters and stuff like this. But I think it's quite cool, quite a good idea.
Thank you.
Okay.
I thought of one more question, just out of curiosity. What did you play at the Thai event? What was your deck?
Okay, so funny thing that during the preparation for the Bangkok tournament, again we were anticipating a lot of aggro decks, a lot of Feldons, and maybe Yoshi Tana and Yoshi Bora. So when we were planning, I initially planned on playing Aragorn, the Jeskai, more of like the mid-range version. But then when I started inviting local players, Filipino players, to join the event, I realized that a lot of them were like the very skilled Rafine players. There were a couple of Slimefoot and Squee, and there were a couple of Reanimator, Aminatu players that were joining the event. And I realized that Aragorn is very bad against those decks. So last minute, I changed to Rafine, and yeah, it worked well for me because I had a lot of good matchups during the event. Fortunately, I made it to top 8 on the second tournament qualifier, but when it came to the quarterfinals, I lost to Octavia, which was funny because during the last round of the qualifier, I went against the same Octavia player. I won, which secured me the spot for the top 8. Then when it came to the quarterfinals, I went against the same Octavia player and I lost.
Sometimes
that is unfortunate, but I've had that happen a couple of times as well. Either losing in the Swiss and then winning in the top 8, or the other way around.
Yeah,
that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Happens all over again. Okay, let's wrap it up with 2 quick questions for you.
What is your favorite commander and what's your least favorite commander? And not confined to the current metagame, anytime ever.
Okay, so my most favorite commander would be Shorikai. It's one of the commanders I really enjoyed playing.
Interesting
because
choice.
I'm a blue player. I'm a blue player by nature. Least favorite would be, I'd go for Hogak. I think Hogak is one of the commanders that you really don't like going against, especially if you already try. Even if your deck is prepared against it, it's very very resilient and has a lot of ways to just push through that last ounce of damage to just end you. So, I mean, Hogak is a very very good commander, but I hate going against it.
Lucky you, it's banned.
True.
Yeah, I can see the points. I think Samuel is with you regarding Shorikai.
I really enjoyed Shorikai when it was legal. I think I played that list on Cam, a not so control based list.
Yeah, it was more like an affinity-ish.
Lent a bit more into the artifacts theme.
Did you play did you use the pact sudden substitution combo?
No, you didn't play that. So you didn't play that.
The sudden substitution and the pact, I think it was intervention pact. So it was like an auto win against red decks and non-white decks.
It was the spell with instant speed, split second, 4 mana, exchange control of target non-creature spell and target creature.
Interesting.
It was like with Tainted Pack you could also do it, right?
Not Tainted Pack. It was with just the red pact, the Pact of the Titan, or
any other
intervention pact.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So you give So you give them you get their creature and you give them the pact. So when they comes to their upkeep, they can't pay it, they lose.
Yeah, exactly. That was funny. That was quite funny. I remember that. But I haven't seen that many deck lists featuring it. Because I think the spell itself, outside of the combo, is quite inflexible.
You'd be surprised. I had a couple of games wherein my opponent played Teferi Time Raveler, and I used it to steal their Teferi and giving them just like a wall or a pilot.
Okay, in terms of Shorikai, I agree. You can just reach over the pilot. But apart from that, I haven't really seen it.
Right.
Changing something for a creature is most often not the best choice in a format.
Decision.
Yeah.
So. Glorious End is also a combo with it, but it costs 3 mana.
I don't know this card. It's
in the turn. And,
true.
At the beginning of your next.
Well, that's very specific. Okay, cool. That's it from my side.
From mine too.
Unless you have any more questions. You do not have any more questions. We can wrap it up.
We'll have your channel in the description. I think Felix can do one of those.
Yeah,
cool pop-ups as
Steven
well.
is always in our recommendation tab on the bottom, anyways. But of course, we will feature your channel in this particular video. Yeah, so you can definitely check it out. You have lots of different videos, lots of different matchups, and you also started with some deck techs. I've noticed some time ago. So
yeah, but it's still a work in progress. But we'll try to add a variety of content also for the channel. Yeah, I think it's our passion project.
Yeah, it's really cool. You should definitely go on providing content from your tournaments. For us, it's very interesting to see what's going on over the sea. Yeah, with that being said, thank you very much for being with us today.
Right. Thank you also for inviting me over.
You're more than welcome. Maybe we'll have a second or third time doing a format like this. Maybe we will also see each other on a tournament one day. That would be awesome. We just had...
Hopefully.
You know, I told you that we just had like our German event, and there was Earl going for the first place with his stick fingers. It was quite awesome. How Duel Commander brings different worlds together.
I agree.
Okay.
And hopefully, Wizards, if you're listening, please make Duel Commander an official format already.
Okay, we have to talk about the committee then. If it's an external committee again, okay, I can agree. If not, let's see.
They might have to abdicate.
Yes. Okay, with that being said,
to everyone listening, thanks for watching and see you next time.
See you next time.